I'll have it either way then.
All right, guys. So since you all are done with number 2, let's talk about number 3. Number due is due tonight midnight, right?
No, next
So good
week.
luck. All right, here's the next one. Are you guys ready?
Yeah.
I'm gonna take like 10-15 minutes on this. It says write a program that processes the following text file and its contents. That opens the text file and processes its content. The following is hyperlinked, and the hyperlink falls off in the text file. So the program should display the following: total sales for each week, average daily sales for each week. You get that? Does that make sense? The second bullet point? The first one is total sales for each week. So, this is one store. You have to read this data and you total the values for the total sales for, you total all those values. Then you compute the average daily sales. So we compute the average of that. This one will be interesting. The total sales for all the weeks. You only have 1 week of information though. Then you have average weekly sales. So I mean, if we went in and added day 8 through 14, then these two will become meaningful. And maybe I should do that, just to give you some test data. Is the third bullet making sense? The one highlighted, total sales for all the weeks? Right now you only have 1 week information. But if you're given 2 weeks or 3 weeks worth of info, then we're looking for total sales for all the weeks that are provided. We also have average weekly sales, which means that if you were given 14 days of data, you would calculate either average of every week and average that, or just average the whole thing. And the week with the highest number of sales and lowest number of sales. So I think what's a miss is it's time to maybe give you at least 3 or 4 weeks worth of data so you can, have some meaningful results for the analytics that is being asked for. Do you have a question there? Did I see a hand go up? Yes, please.
So this is all, so each row represents a different store or a different week?
A row represents a different store. So let's look at the rest. The file contains the dollar amount of sales that a retail store made each day for a number of weeks.
Weeks.
No, hang on. Each line in the file contains 7 numbers, which are sales numbers for 1 week. The numbers are separated by a space. Each line in file represents a separate store. So basically, if we need, what I'll do is, I'll go update this file. So you have day 8, day 9, day 10, all the way up to day 21. I think 3 weeks should be enough. So I'll take care of that.
The highest you don't have in store
No, for each store, you'll do that. So this is going to be a nice design exercise. Alright? Because you're gonna end up using encapsulation, association, array of objects. So, I would like you guys to think about this, like to maybe work in pairs or alone or however you figure, just think of the design possibilities. Obviously, we are not going to do everything in main with local variables, right? So you have to think about this. You have to take the data, you have to have something where you parse the strings in a file and populate certain objects, and then each object will then be the analysis. So we need to do some object design. And I guess we can discuss that in detail on Wednesday. And for today, you guys have some thinking time. So if you come up with a solution, maybe we can look at it even today. So, you know, but there are, what is the best way to come up with a design? We have, you can look at common nouns in the description as a starting point. So now you're saying we need to know the, you have a store, you have daily sales, you have weekly sales, and we're not going to maybe say, do we need to save weekly sales? Because we can always calculate those, we can write methods for that, right? So we have to deal with one store, and we also have to deal with a bunch of stores. Do we create a separate class for a bunch of stores? We create a class for stores. Do we create a separate class for reading the data? Right? Might be a good idea. Maybe I'm making this too easy. Huh?
Let's not get too crazy.
No. I mean, the design part. So, this is how I would probably think about it, but you guys give it a shot. And if you have something, you know, on paper, pen and paper is fine, you know. That's okay. Try that. Oh wait, that's it. And I'll update the file. Any questions? Yes.
I'm a little bit unclear on how we know whether to create new classes or whether to just have a lot of methods
In one class.
one class.
Well, if you look at your, so in this case, you really have to look at your physical world and see how objects are organized, right? So the objects of the physical world here are stores and numbers associated with stores and bunch of stores. And then there is functionality. So if I have stores, I probably don't want to put all the responsibilities of reading data, you know, from a file. I'll probably put that separately. So the short answer to your question is that has to be experienced over time. It won't happen, you know, with the first, few projects, but it does happen over time. It comes together. And there is actually a technique which I may have mentioned to you guys, CRC, Collaboration Responsibility Classes. Okay, there is a technique, there is a process by which you take requirements and come up with design and a class diagram, and then you construct. So I'll go over that after the midterm. I think I mentioned that in one of the lectures in this course, because I remember seeing the video. And I was reminded of that comment, in fact, earlier today. Because I was watching my own lectures, not watching but posting. So I end up playing parts of it just to make sure they're working, so I'll cover that. Okay, any other questions?
Do you expect us to make 21 methods?
Why?
Because you make a method for each day, and then you can just like, or you make an array of it?
No. Yeah, you deal with arrays.
That's-
No, you don't get paid by the number of methods you write either. So you only wanna,
Are you supposed to make a class of it?
yeah,
I don't know.
well, that's the part of the design. So try and hack something together design-wise. So, yes.
How many, this is just a, just Java convention question, but how many, per class, generally, how much is it, like, where it's at that point where it's too much information in one class and you wanna make another class and then make them interact with each other? Like, at what point is there too much information in one class?
Some classes have a lot of responsibility.
Is that bad though? Shouldn't you have like?
No.
I mean,
In this case, I am actually, there are at least 3 or 4 classes.
Right.
And,
how come people don't just put all, like, let's say they write one giant program with a bunch of methods, right? Why don't they just put it all in one class? Like, they don't care about putting too much pressure on just one class.
That's not object-oriented then. That's like programming in C where you write a bunch of methods and using the structured programming technique. The object-oriented programming technique is to think about objects as self-contained independent entities. And so if I have like toothbrush and toothpaste, right?
Yeah.
I can't take the properties of toothbrush and put it in toothpaste, or vice versa.
Right.
And so that's why that was my answer earlier, that you look at the physical world and to as a guide, which is the case because the person that created object-oriented programming, Bijan Strusov, he looked at the physical world to come up with these 5 relationships that we are starting to implement. And so to answer the question, how much responsibility is too much, the answer there is that if you create an object and it's self-contained and independent, right?
Mm-hmm.
And it has 50 methods, if that's what it takes, it's fine. If it takes 5 methods, that's fine. But the responsibilities of other classes should not be added. We should not commingle responsibilities between classes. And so you want to, that's a logic decision or logical decision you have to make by looking at the requirements. One of the things that software engineers get really good at over time is taking the requirements and coming up with a design. And in this course, like 35A, I'm taking steps to have you guys do this from the very beginning. So when you come to 35B, you're already good with design practices.
Thank you.
Yeah.
So could we do like a reader class that passes information in an array to like a calculation class that passes then some variables to like a store class that has store objects?
Are you discussing the design with me? Okay, I guess it's a class exercise, so. All right, so give me the design. Are we still rolling, right? Okay, cool, so I stop. So today's all on you then. Okay, so you're giving me, one possibility is create a reader class, storage class, and calculation class. And then a driver class, because I like the drivers to be separate. Right, guys? The driver is always separate. So, I guess it down.
I
So-
would say, can we put the storage and calculation in the same class? Because if we're already calculating and getting the values, We don't have to return it to another class and then output it there, right?
Well, I was thinking of creating an object called a store. So like for each store
Mm-hmm.
is a new object called store, like store one, store
Oh.
two,
Okay, so she's got store.
as an object. And that object has variables called like highest week and.
Right, that's fine. Let's just think of the objects you'll have. So how is store linked to storage?
Store is part of storage. Store is the,
Storage
I thought they
contains
Yes.
store.
Or store an instance of the storage class, because then like each.
I have problem with storage and calculations.
Yeah.
Because that's becoming, so generally when you come up with classes, those are nouns
well, store.
and not words. Not that I'm saying storage and calculation, right? But calculations would be methods. It wouldn't be a class, right? So when you think of names of the classes, think of nouns. And so I like store, right? Okay, store, let's work with. One store, and it can do everything, it can do calculations too. If I have to deal with a bunch of stores, then what would you call that?
An array?
I know, but what would that class be called?
Group, store team, I don't know, store. Oh, chain, yeah, that's a good one.
Nice. So store chain, because we could be writing this for McDonald's, Miss Analytics. Let's imagine that, right? We're dealing with McDonald's or Subway, or if you want to go healthier, whatever.
So
Cartridge bowl.
would store be a class or would it be an object, or would it be both, a class?
Well, we are coming up with names of classes,
Okay,
and we'll make objects for each class.
oh, okay.
So store would be an instance of store chain, right?
No, store chain is a class, and it will have an instance. Store will also be a class, and it will have an instance.
Well, could we make it so that store is an instance of store chain, and then store chain does the calculations in storage, that each time you put new inputs into store chain, you create a new store?
Sure.
Yeah.
So what you're really saying is,
So store would be an object of store chain.
one second. Store chain contains store.
No, I said instead of doing it like that, right? I was just out of curiosity. Instead of making it so store is a separate class which contains store chain, how about it's like there's only one class store chain, and then every single time you create a new instance of store chain, that's just a different store. So like let's say you want you have store chain, and then it has then store chain does things like it does it gets from the reader, does calculations, and it does storage. Then the file, every single time that store chain is initiated, it's an object, right? And then each of those objects is just a different store.
Well, but store chain is a bunch of stores, you see.
Yeah.
And so when I think of a store, to me that's a separate object. And when I take a bunch of stores, that's a separate object.
Oh, okay.
And so, but if I create a store chain, then I can say store chain McDonald's, store chain Burger King, store chain Subway, and now I've got a program. All I have to do is put together a mobile app, and people can start doing their calculations.
So then,
And not to mention reader. I like that as a separate class. And reader is going to be associated with store. Or store chain. Because I have one text file from which I'll read all the data and populate data for stored chains. And basically I'll just have one file for a chain. So if I instantiate one stored chain, and if it has 7 stores for 3 weeks of data, I can read all that in store chain and store. And there will be methods in store which does all the calculations. And I can have 1 2-string method that dumps out everything. So the main will be very quiet. Which means for this lab, we will end up using association and container. And my topic for Wednesday is container. And this is with arrays. And you'll end up reading a text file, parsing it. So this is the first cut of the design.
Do we ever have like a printing class, since we have a reading class?
No, reader is from the file.
But if we wanna print to a file or display,
Then it'll go, then you just do file IO. If you want to do anything with file,
okay,
create a file IO class and put reader and writer methods in it, right? That are specialized. So you don't have to, and print methods for, if you're gonna write all the output to a file, right? It's preferred that the store prints its own calculation.
so that would be in the store.
Right. And if you want to print data for all the chains,
The chain.
the full, like the entire chain, then it can have, can have its own print method, right? And the method of the stored chain can be called in file IO print method.
Oh, okay.
So you kind of make it self-contained, so, and this will explain self-contained more. We just have to go through the design a little more.
So the method would be defined in file IO but called by store chain, or defined in store chain but called by file IO?
Actually, what happens is, if I have one property in store that I'm printing, I'll write a print method in store, right? And that method can be called in store chain, and the method of the store chain can be called in file IO.
Okay.
I'll go through it. That's going through containment actually. So we'll talk about containment and self-contained classes on Wednesday. I guess I didn't really give you guys a chance to design this. Any comments or questions? None? Okay, that's all for tonight. If you have any questions come up, I'll be happy to help you guys. All right. I guess I should post this.